And when he comes back, he says, they're only 300 in number. However, I see that these people will not be killed until one of them at least kills one of you. So the least damage that will be done to the army of Quraysh is that 300 of them will die. And he also observed that these people are annihilated in their love for Muhammad. Nothing's going to stop them. You can't stop them. And he said, Abu Jahl said to this man, he says, it looks like Muhammad has done some magic on you, done some sorcery. It's still going to stop the truth. And so the Prophet ﷺ, after praying Fajr with his Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, he organizes them in their rows. Soldiers, lines the soldiers up, ready for jihad and qital. As the dawn breaks and the sun rises. As the sun rises on the shining moon of Badr al-Munir Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam on the day of Badr. So he organizes their affairs, makes sure they're in straight rows, no one is ahead of anyone, no one is behind anyone, and everyone is standing straight and ready. And so the Prophet ﷺ takes his arrow. He has an arrow which is unsharpened, so it's not yet prepared to be an arrow, and he uses it in order to indicate to them to come into line. And then he comes across one of the Sahaba by the name of Sawad, and Sawad is out of line. And the Prophet ﷺ, he takes his arrow and he pokes it into the stomach of Sawad. So get in line, come to your line. He was too far forward. And so Sawad, he calls out, Ya Rasulullah, you've hurt me. Prophet he told him, come back into line, on the outside. He says, Ya Rasulullah, you hurt me. And he says to him, Sawad says, he says, Allah Ta'ala has sent you with justice. So allow me to take my right from you. You hit me, I want to hit you. Allah sent you with justice. So give me this opportunity. So the Prophet ﷺ, he gives him the opportunity. But Sawad says, Ya Rasulullah, when you hit me, my belly was uncovered. When you hit me on my skin, you're covered. You have your rida on your cloak. So the Prophet ﷺ lives over his stomach. And so Sawad radiallahu anhu, he goes to the belly of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and he kisses him. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says to him, what was it that motivated you to do this? He says, Ya Rasulullah, we're now faced by that which you see. Meaning, there's surely a battle to occur. And I desire that my last moment with you be one in which my skin touches your skin. And that the last thing which my skin touched before leaving this dunya is your skin, O Rasulullah. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he makes dua for him, and he blesses him, and he prays for him. And this particular Sahabi becomes also one of the Shuhada of Badr, one of the martyrs. The last thing which his skin touched was the skin of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah. So the duha of Friday comes. The sun has risen, the day is approached in the mid-morning, and the battle commences. The enemies line up in front of the Sahaba, and the Quraysh send three of their men for like the individual duel, which they traditionally have, the Arabs, before the battle commences, they have an individual battle. So the Quraysh, they send three of their representatives. And they ask for the Muslims to send their representatives. And so they send. And of course, the Sahaba are all dressed in their armor, so they're not able to be recognized by the Quraysh. And so they ask them, who are you? And they say, we so-and-so, so-and-so, the Ansar. And the Quraysh say, we don't want you. Give us some of our people. We want to take revenge against our people, those who we kicked out of Mecca. And so the Ansar come back, and the Prophet ﷺ says, Qum ya Ali, rise O Ali, Ali ibn Abi Talib. قم يا Hamza, rise O Hamza, Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib, and Ubaidah ibn al-Harith ibn Abdul Muttalib. He says him to rise. So these three, they rise and they go out and they ask by Quraysh, who are you? And they say that they are. So they accept now the commencement of the plan. Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu overpowers his opponents. And one strike, he puts him to the ground. Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib overpowers his opponents. Kills him, laying down on the ground. Who's left? Sayyidina Ubaidah ibn al-Harith. Sayyidina Ubaidah ibn al-Harith was against Utbah ibn Rabi'ah. Utbah ibn Rabi'ah had struck a sword at Sayyidina Ubaidah, and Ubaidah at Utbah. So they had each struck one another and had received injuries as a result. And Sayyidina Ubaidah radiallahu ta'ala was struck at his leg. So his leg was slightly cut. And so Sayyidina Ali and Hamza, they see the situation, and because they know this was not necessarily one-on-one, but it was 3-on-3. So it was permissible for them to assist their Sahabi, and so they go and they finish the enemy off, put him down. And then they hold Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu and Sayyidina Hamza, Sayfullah, Asadullah, the lion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Asadullah, his courage. He goes out with Sayyidina Ali and they hold Sayyidina Ubaidah because he can no longer walk with his leg. They hold him, they take him back to the tent of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And Ubaidah comes in. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam instructs them to place his head, Ubaidah's head, on the legs of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he says, "Oh Rasulullah," look at his concern and his thoughts. He says, "Oh Rasulullah, if I die from this injury, will I die as a shaheed, as a martyr? Will I enter paradise?" And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says yes. And so he died later on, not on that day of the battle, died later on. So his shauq, his journey was for Jannah, and he wanted to ensure that this deed would earn him Jannah. And so the Prophet ﷺ then encourages his Sahaba, and he says, "By the one in whose hand is the soul of Muhammad, no man will be slain this day," meaning no man will die this day, fighting against them in steadfast hope of his reward, advancing, not turning back, except that Allah Ta'ala will enter him into paradise immediately, without hesitation. And so his words were advanced to the Sahaba, and one of the Sahaba by the name of Umayr, from the Ansar of Khazraj, he hears these words in this address of the Prophet ﷺ. At that time he's eating some dates, in the mid-morning time, he's eating some dates, he has some dates and he's eating some dates. As soon as he hears these words, he says, "Ya Rasulullah, can you repeat those words that you said?" And so the Prophet ﷺ repeats these words, and he says, "Ya Ajab, oh wonder of wonders." He says, "Is there nothing between me and my entering paradise except that these men should kill me?" And at that, he threw his dates away, and he says, "By Allah, if I were to finish these dates that I'm eating, life would be too long." So he takes the dates, throws them out of his mouth, and he goes into the battlefield. And Allah Ta'ala gives him shahada, gives him martyrdom. So this desire for Jannah was an inner desire of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala. And anything that would grant them Jannah, they would undertake and they would fulfill. So, on that night, if we go back to that night before Fajr, and we recollect the state of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his dua, and that which led to the morning and the battle which occurred on that Friday of the 17th of Badr. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam spent it in night in prostration. And then, on that day, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in sujood. And Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala, on that morning, as the battle was occurring, he would frequent the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his tent. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in that mid-morning, he was making dua to Allah and in sujood, in prostration to Allah. Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib would come and he would hear Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in his dua saying, Ya Hayy Ya Qayyum, Ya Hayy Ya Qayyum, Ya Hayy Ya Qayyum, O ever living, O everlasting. And then he says, Sayyidina Ali observes, and he saw the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam rise from his sujood. And upon rising from his sujood, he says, Allahu Akbar. And then the Prophet ﷺ says that Jibreel has just come and he's got dust on his face. And then Ali radiallahu anhu says, at that I felt a strong breeze come. And he says, with that strong breeze came 1,000 angels, being led by Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam, and they came and took position on the right of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.